Thanks, Christine. Looks like we're recording, so I will get started. So hi everyone, I'm Matt. I work for Department for Levelling Up Housing Communities on our planning software team. May have seen some of you before, but I'm not sure. What we thought would be an interesting thing to do at this moment in time is give a bit quick summary of how we're working together. So thank you for lending me your ears for about 10 minutes or so talking about project governance. I'll try and keep it interesting, and then you'll get onto the real juicy stuff when you hear from the PlanX team. But I think it's a useful thing to touch base on every so often, and I don't think we've done it publicly for a bit of a while. So those of you that have been following this along for a while know what's going on here. This is a community of councils coming together to think about how better services could be for planning applications could be designed and rolled out across the country. We've got councils that are working with existing providers, and we've got councils that are working with technology companies such as Open Systems Lab, who you hear from later, to design PlanX and BOPs as new open source alternatives to what's out there in the market. And that's the bit that we're going to focus on, or I'm going to focus on in this bit, which is how these organisations are coming together in, we hope, what is quite an effective way to design these solutions. First thing is just talk about some kind of key principles. So products are designed around user needs. We think that this is really important, that the people that are using the services, whether that's applicants or council officers, are really heavily involved in the development of things, because ultimately that's where these are the people who know the pain points that they're experiencing best, and also the best ways to overcome those. The second thing to briefly say is that we work using a methodology called Scrum, which is in 2 weekly sprints, which means that we always have an opportunity across the entire program to look at what's working and what's being learned and correct things or improve things in quite a short time frame. And we have this kind of occasion every 4 weeks to kind of come together and share with you all what the progress looks like. In terms of how people work together, though, which is going to be the focus of what I'm going to talk about, there are about 6 key principles here. We didn't create these. These are inspired by sociocracy. There's also another brilliant collaborative local government project called Local Gov Drupal that some of you may have heard of, that's been funded by DLAC in the past, that embeds a lot of these in it too. So really looking at what's working well elsewhere. But just to run through these 6 things and then talk about what it looks like in practice. The first thing is work happens in dedicated groups, represented by circles in all of the diagrams I'm about to show you. Actions are documented transparently by all of these groups so that everyone, no matter on the project, no matter whether you're working on things or not, can have a sight of what's going on. And representatives from each of those established groups work across and between different groups to facilitate communication and ensure there's some alignment. But the important thing is that decision-making accountability here is not hierarchical and it's not centralized. It's delegated out to the group with the right subject matter expertise and in the best position to make the decisions. And where possible, or where appropriate, decisions are not always consensus-based, because you've seen there are 33 organisations involved in total. There are, I think, around 12 councils, up to 12 involved in co-design activities. It's really challenging to get everyone on the same page all the time. So we think about principles of consent where it makes sense. And then lastly, roles and responsibilities of all participants are clearly defined. So how that kind of looks and feels like in practice is that there's often a core delivery team at the centre, which is made up of the delivery partner. So Open Systems Lab, Unboxed and Immensa are the main contributors here. There's then product group, which is where most of the council representatives sit. So each council nominates one person to be part of the product group if they're interested in it. That's for BOPs or PlanX. And then the user group is the wider group of people that takes part in testing, which may be from councils, but actually also we have ad hoc contributions from applicants and members of the public as well. Now each group does this documentation side of things through a terms of reference, which explains what they exist for and who's part of that group. So this is an example around a delivery team. For example, that's what I'm going to go into here, has a direct link to another group. So no work group is working in isolation and there are strong connections there. So the product group and the delivery team work really closely together. The role of the product group is effectively to manage the product roadmap. So this is all of the things that the delivery team goes on to build. And this product roadmap is reviewed. It depends on the moment in time, it depends on the project and team and availability of people, but it's typically around every 4 to 8 weeks. When things are prioritized into that now column, the things that need to be worked on within that next 4 to 8 week period, they're divided up by the delivery team on a delivery board into a backlog, a prioritized backlog of activities, which are then worked on in 2 weekly sprints. And to ensure there's good connection between these two things, and that it's not just the delivery team that takes full responsibility for that 2 month kind of period, the idea is that representatives from that product group work with the delivery team in order to provide insights, to provide guidance where it's needed. And that there's also that kind of link back. So actually people in the delivery team are there leading and part of those product group road mapping sessions to inform all the decisions based on what's been working well so far. One of the key things that we try to do is ensure that decisions are made to go forward when they're safe to try. This is this concept of consent, and it's a really challenging thing to actually realize in practice. But the key thing here is that we're moving away from decisions being made on individuals' preferences and starting to think about, well, what would work versus where is there a really clear objection to something happening? So the analogy that I always like to refer to is if you're with some friends and you're looking to go to a restaurant and someone says, oh, I'd really love to have Thai food today. And then someone else in your friendship group says, I really can't have Thai food because I have a peanut allergy. This is a really clear example of like an objection versus a preference. And some of the things that we've encountered along the way have been where there are certain legal requirements, which is really clear kind of objection territory. But it's a fascinating dynamic to watch play out. And I know a lot of you who have been involved in co-design have been having various negotiations along the way. And then some people sit in that further group out of user groups where they take part in research and testing activities from time to time. We also, beyond the product groups, which as DLUC, I'm personally not very heavily involved in these days anyway, there's project operations, which is a series of different functions and different working groups that work in a similar way. Each are led by one member of my team in DLUC and have a really clear purpose that serves the rest of the kind of project group ecosystem. So there are particular groups, for example, around metrics and performance measurement, a technical working group, a data working group, and one thinking about onboarding and adoption and how the products go from get to live, I suppose, in councils as quickly as possible. All of those same principles apply, and within those working groups, there's also representation from councils across the piece. And then at the centre of all of this, and this is where we get more bubbles emerging, where we've got these kind of 4 significant areas: BOPS product, PlanX services, which is slightly different. That's everything that's built on top of PlanX, and then the operations. The centre of all of that is the product steering group, which is slowly coming together. And at this point, I have to say, of course, that this is an aspired to model insofar as not everything here, because it's working with human beings, goes exactly like this. But this is a kind of a loose framework that we've landed on. And when you put it all together, it might look a bit like this, which is probably out of date for those of you that have seen this before, this unwieldy set of interconnected circles. And I think that's something we can review and update in this sort of environment at some point in the future. And then last but not least, just to touch on this roles and responsibilities side of things. Through working on this stuff for the last really 3 years, the collective have kind of come together to define key functions and key roles and the responsibilities that sit with those. And these are the kind of the top 7 at the moment, probably always overdue a refresh. But it starts to provide a bit of certainty around where contributions are made, because each of those specific roles would sit within a specific working group. And it helps inform the shape of a local authority's kind of digital planning team or contributing team working on these projects. And last but not least, there's some structure through what someone once referred to as the school timetable, which I thought was brilliant. lots of things happen a lot of the time, and this provides a bit of guidance and certainty about where people performing different functions or working in different working groups should be allocating their time. So those of you that are embedded in the project team might be aware of this, but there's some really great stuff coming on the Open Digital Planning Resource Hub in terms of updates in the next couple of weeks that will make this even easier for you to navigate. So that's just a quick canter through kind of ways of working types of thing. Again, I'll just emphasize this is our aspire to model, and every day we're working closer towards it. But of course, the reality of human interactions means that things are different and there's flexibility within that. It was an interesting thing to share with everyone that we haven't done for quite a while. So thanks for your time. I think if there's any questions on that, let's take them right at the end, because really the emphasis of this session is on PlanX. So without further ado, Christine, shall I pass back to you and then on to PlanX colleagues?
Yeah, so we're going to move on to edit permissions, and that, David, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready to go. Yeah, thank you. If you're happy to steer the slides. Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm David from Open Systems Lab, and I'm working on the PlanX product. I'm a developer here, and I'm going to talk you through today some of the changes we made recently to editor permissions. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just a kind of a brief summary of how things have worked up until now, and just to remind everyone here as well that we're really looking at the kind of the editor interface of PlanX. We're kind of members of the council, kind of subject matter experts in planning, log on and build these guidance and submission services, not the public interface which applicants deal with, which we've kind of demoed quite a lot on these subjects. So we're looking at the other side of PlanX right now. So the way it works, the way it has worked up until now, I should say, is that we had a very kind of open and collaborative model, which we had from kind of prototype stage going onwards, where anyone who was logged in and authorized could update and publish flows across teams. Now, the reason we had that, of course, was to kind of foster kind of collaboration. We definitely don't want to lose that. But I'm sure you can imagine that as the platform grows and matures, you know, we have a responsibility, and we've always had a desire to put those kind of access controls into the product to make sure people know what's being published in their name, what's being served up, and what they can and can't control. So yeah, this has definitely been on the roadmap for a long time. I'm sure there'll be lots of people happy that we've managed to kind of move this forward for sure. I've definitely had a few comments to that effect. So yeah, I'm going to talk you through the changes we've made and how we've kind of tried to keep some of those kind of ideals of kind of collaboration alive within the platform. Next slide, please. So the new model we're adopting is kind of quite a standard model. It's using team-based roles. What that means is that one user could belong to many teams, and therefore they could be allowed access to work on either their flow or the flows and services of another team or council if they were granted that permission. And it's definitely, we're going with a simple model initially, but what we want to make sure is that the model we adopt does allow us to kind of scale and evolve as requirements change, so we can make it more granular in the future. We can have different types of roles and we can adapt it like that. Next slide, please. So this is a kind of a quick diagram of what this really looks like. It's called role-based access controls, and it's a fairly standard model you often see across kind of web applications and other software. Essentially, we take a user, we consider both their team and their role, and that lets us build up a kind of a set of permissions which outlines what resources they're allowed to get hold of and what actions they're allowed to do to those resources. So if you could hit the next slide, please. I think there's a few little transitions coming here that'll just maybe give us an example of that. So yeah, the user would be Jane. They're from Lambeth, they're a team editor. And based on those, we'd be able to find out, yes, they're able to publish this flow for Lambeth. Next slide, please. So these are the initial set of pretty basic but pretty essential permissions we're going for to begin with. It's basically two roles, which is an editor and a viewer. And I'm not going to talk you through every kind of permutation here, but essentially you can see that the team editor has a higher set of permissions than the viewer. They can edit, update, and view everything, and then the viewers obviously can view. And if you hit next slide, please, I think you can see quite naturally that there's maybe a space in the future for a team admin role, which may have a higher set of permissions, That's not there today, but we're certain that that may be a requirement coming up, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. Next slide, please. Right, live demo. Let's go for it. I'm gonna see if I can share my screen, and I'll show you what this looks like now. So please allow me a moment whilst I try and work this out. I'm not a day-to-day Teams user. Can you see that, or are you still seeing yourselves? I think I maybe shared my tab there. 1 second.
Oh, we could see it. Now we can see ourselves.
Ah, I spoke too soon. Sorry, when I go across, I'll lose you guys. So Matt, I'll ask you, can you see PlanX there, please?
Yep. Looks lovely.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So this is me logged in to PlanX, and as I said, this is the editor half, which we don't demo as often on these show and tells. And there's a few initial changes here. So we do have these little icons to indicate what I can view. And then there are other teams here which I can edit. So there's a little kind of iconography kind of throughout. And in the little kind of user bar here, it does list which teams I have edit permissions for and which teams I have kind of view only access to. So let's jump into a team where I can make some edits just to show you how that looks and behaves. Obviously, nothing here has changed fundamentally. It's still exactly as we'd expect. I have the same permissions I had before. And I'm still able to go ahead and make changes. I could change this text and save it. I could drag things around, and make changes if I wish to do so. So this fundamentally hasn't changed, and will remain the same experience for editors if you have permissions to do so. But if I were to go onto a team which I have kind of view only access to, I kind of have a lower permission set. So I'm reminded of this by the icon up at the top here. This kind of publish button is disabled because I don't have access to do that. And you can see those little drag handles that allow me to move these nodes around and change the structure of the service have been removed. And of course, it's not just the user interface, the permissions are enforced behind the scenes, as it were. If I were to open up a node, so part of the service, I can see the details still and I can understand what's happening, but I can't make kind of changes to this. So that would still allow me to interrogate and understand another team's service, but I wouldn't be able to go ahead and make changes to that unless I were granted access. As I said, I can belong to many teams. One thing I'd like to kind of highlight here as well is what we're calling the templates team. Now, all users will have access to this, and it's a way that allows us to kind of still keep that kind of collaboration. So all users will be able to kind of update and copy from this team, and anyone can make a copy of their service and copy into here to allow them to share a flow if they wish to do so. So that's quite different to the workflow we've gone from, where you could kind of copy flows and move them to your team as you wish to do so. But we're hoping that that will start us off initially with that kind of collaboration model, and we'll definitely kind of seek feedback on that and see how that works going forward. So if we can jump back to the slides, it was just a brief demo showing you kind of some of the kind of visual elements of that.
Would you like me to continue sharing them? Or...
Yeah, sorry, Matt. Yeah, if you can jump
no
back to slide. There's just a one more kind of next steps before I hand over to my colleague. Thank you. So yeah, what are the next steps and where are we with this now? This is actually live on production today. So this can be used and tested, and we're always seeking feedback. So if you're one of the people with access to the PlanX editor and you've not seen this before, I would definitely encourage you to give us feedback via the normal channels. We also do have kind of documentation, which in our service specifications, which can be shared after this for those who'd like to see it as public. But hopefully the people who are familiar with those service specs, which have been demoed on, I think, the last show and tell, or maybe the one before that, would be able to kind of see and access those. And yeah, we're going to then see what user stories follow through. So going back to what Matt was talking about earlier on, we're working with these kind of quick feedback cycles rather than us deciding all up front what we think the right solution is. We've gone for a lightweight, agile approach. And then as we gather feedback, we'll go and add maybe more roles or change the permission sets of those roles. So rather than doing it all up front, we're going to iterate and move forwards with that. I can see a few questions have come in. Matt, would you like me to take some of them now, or would it be better if we did them all at the end just to move things forward? What's the best format, do you think?
I don't know what the questions are. I think Christine's keeping an eye on that. So
there's only 2 questions, so you could take them now. Yeah. So shall I read them out to you?
Yeah, if you could, please, that'd be very helpful. Thank you.
PlanX is good, but we have a challenge with taking payments. How soon will we be able to use other payment engines rather than just gov.pay, as most councils don't use it?
Yeah, that's so. They're not a question on kind of permissions specifically, but that is correct. Currently, we support kind of GovPay, and I guess it comes back to the kind of the roadmap discussion which Matt was having earlier on. If there are new requirements for new payment engines and there is a demand, we'd have to take that to the roadmap and work out how we're going to prioritize that. Essentially, is the answer to that one.
Okay, awesome, thank you. And the next question: how do you know who has permission if you will start to need it?
I don't quite follow that question. Sorry, Susan. Apologies. If you're on the call, could you explain it?
So yeah, it's so if you don't have permission, but you think you're going to need it, how do you know where to go in order to change your permissions? I'm thinking like going forward into this in operation, what will the setup be in the system so you don't have to rummage around in your department? But does it actually tell you who to go to change this permission on the system?
That's a great question. So no, you're right in highlighting it. Currently, it's kind of controlled by staff at Open Systems Lab. So if you needed to change permissions, it would have to be a request which gets routed through us. Now, we don't see that being like a sustainable model going future. So eventually there will be some sort of user interface to allow you to change that. And maybe that kind of team admin role would have the powers to change people's permissions and change that permission set. As I said, that's not here today, but it's something we envision will be there. But again, we'll see what the demand is and what the priorities are based on the roadmap and decide where that will fall kind of accordingly, I guess.
Okay, thank you. And one last question from Imran. Can I copy the flow from another team, which I only have view access for?
That's a really good question, and you're not the first person to ask it, Imran. I think the model we've gone for initially is kind of by consent. So if you needed to copy another team's flow, you'd need to request that they copy it on your behalf. As I said, that's kind of different to the model we've been running with up until now. So if we do get a lot of feedback on that, that's definitely something which we could look to change, but that's the initial version we've gone for. So yeah, if you have thoughts on that, I'd definitely be curious to bring them to the kind of the Blue Trello meetings and take it from there. Alistair, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick addition to that. That also speaks to the value of the templates thing. So that's, as you say, we've started off with this approach where we say, oh, it's by consent. So you'd have to ask them. But what we are also doing, and August has started this work already, and this will be a collaborative effort, is with the main services that people are using, so the main services that ODP are driving the development of, we aim to keep templates in that template team, and everyone will have access to that template team. So you will be able to go into that and make a copy of that template and send a template to your council team, which you can then start to customize. And hopefully those templates will be reasonably well written up. So it'll say, put your council name in here, and you'll need to put your next steps in here and things like that. So there'll be a bit of instructions there, and that hopefully we'll get a bit better at that over time.
Cool, Alistair. That answers my question, and that's absolutely fine.
Perfect. Thanks for the clarification, Alistair, and thanks for the really good question, Imran. Yeah, I'm not seeing any other questions just now. If any more come in, there'll be a session time at the end of the whole section to cover that. So yeah, please, any more permission questions, feel free to write them up and we'll get time to address them towards the end. Matt, if you're okay to share the slides, I think it's over to my colleague Ian next of all.
Yeah, Ian's going to be talking about design changes from user research.
Thanks, Christine. Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name's Ian. I'm a designer and a developer working with OSL on the PlanX project. Just waiting to see the slides. Are you showing those, Matt?
Yes. Can you not see them yet?
I can't see them. I'm not sure if everyone else can.
Yeah, I
I
can
see.
You can see that. Okay, so I can just jump onto my slides for reference. So you should probably see the title slide. So today I'd like to talk about 3 design updates that we've made as a direct result from user research. Could I have the next slide, please? It should be titled User Research Design Cycle. So Matt briefly touched on this earlier. So we do have a process of user research within the PlanX platform, and this is carried out by Nemensa, namely Hannah and Lucy, who do a fantastic job of guiding users through sessions and yeah, it's usually involving 6 participants. We select these on based on a set criteria. So, for example, homeowners or agents. And then the findings are summarized and reported. And usually we have a mixture of content and design challenges that come out from this. It does tend to veer more to the content and the service design side, but we do have repeat design challenges that come up that we like to prioritize and address. And then when we make those updates, they can be retested and iterated over the further cycles, so that cycle continues. Next slide, please. So when I talk about the user interface or the UI, I'm talking about the on-screen interactions of PlanX that we have control of. So there's a lot of bits that we don't have control of, for example, like a user's email client, the browser, the particular device that they're on, but there are a lot of things that we do have direct control of. And our interface is based on the gov.uk or the GDS government design system, services design system, with a number of custom components that we've built for PlanX. And when we're building these and maintaining them, we always try to adhere by principles of effective UI design. And 3 real big ones are intuitive, accessible, and trustworthy. Intuitive is really important here because PlanX is quite a complex interaction for people to have. So they're already been challenged in quite a few ways. So we don't want to make the interface provide any barriers. We want it to be as intuitive as possible. We don't want them to have to think about it, basically. We want it just to be there and for them to be able to control it and do what they want with it. And of course, accessible and trustworthy. With everything that we put together, we have to uphold that as well. Next slide, please. So the first UI challenge that we've had that's repeatedly come up is the visibility of our help text. When I say help text, what I mean by that is further context that can be given for a question, and that is toggled by a link on the interface. Previously, we were signposting that with a small circular question mark icon, which you can see on the right-hand side of the title there. And we saw that participants were frequently not seeing that, and when asked at the end of a service whether they knew of the existence of any further help text, very often they said they did not. So we knew that we needed to improve that. Next slide, please. So what we've done for help text is worked mainly on the visibility of it. So you can see there on the first screen on the left, at the right hand side, we've increased the size of the help text toggle. We've changed the icon to the word help so that it's more obvious. And a really important one, we've made that sticky to the interface as well. So rather than being as part of the title, so that when you scroll away, you lose that on the screen, you can see on the right hand side there, it's actually stuck to the top of the viewport. So it's omnipresent. So no matter where you are on a screen, you'll always have that help icon or help link available. Next slide, please. So the next challenge we have was based around the usability of upload and label component. So what you're seeing here is a list, a checklist that's actually popped out on top of a modal. So we've got 3 layers of interface here. So this is quite a complex interaction. And what we were seeing repeatedly was that users were struggling to continue once they'd made their checks. So I've checked a couple of boxes there on the right for an example. Once they'd made those selections, they were struggling to know how to continue. And really the only way to do it would be to click outside of the window to close it. But that's not an obvious choice, especially given there's a modal underneath it. And normally to click outside of a modal would be to close it. So we're giving kind of conflicted information here. This is quite a nice one, really, because the participants actually told us what we needed to do. We repeatedly hear that they wanted to see a done or a close button to complete this interaction. Next slide, please. So what we were able to do was add a header to that checklist with a done button. And you can see on the right hand side, it becomes really effective on a smaller screen. So I've scrolled to the bottom of the list there, and you can see it's stuck to the top of the screen. So again, it's omnipresent, it's always there. They don't have to think about where to go next, it's just there for them. Next slide, please. Then the last UI challenge I wanted to talk about was the limitation of section titles. So this is really a content or a service kind of thing, but I guess it's more of a limitation of what the interface was allowing the content to do. So for longer services, we give a summary of the sections contained therein, and frequently we were told that participants did not feel that the titles accurately reflected the scope and the expectations of what was expected of them for each service. For example, the About You section might be 3 questions, about the project might be up to say 30, 35 questions, depending on what they select within that. And we really weren't doing a good job of conveying the kind of complexity and the length of those. Next slide, please. And again, this is quite a simple one. What we were able to do was add a summary to each of the sections. So within the editor, there's now a field that allows editors to add a summary in, which should be able to give users more context of what's in each section. And next slide, please. So what happens next? So all of the updates I've just shared with you have already been retested, and the results are due to be presented later today. And going back to that design and user research cycle, further design challenges will be identified and iterated on as we go through the cycle. And that's it for me. I'll now pass to my colleague August, who will talk about find out if services.
Just to say, we've got one question. Do you want to answer it now, Ian?
Sure.
Or yeah, okay. So well, we've got 2 now. But the question is from Nick, and he has asked, what research or identification of development requirements have there been to move up the WCAG 2.2 accessibility standards that are now live?
Sure, it's a good question. So we were actually in the process of doing an external audit on PlanX, which I can't tell you for sure, but I'm fairly certain will adhere to WCAG 2.2. I'll have to get back to you about on that one. But yes, there's an external audit being done currently that we will have the results of shortly, hopefully. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Awesome, thank you, Ian. And just one other question that's come in from Imran: is it possible to tell users the expected time it might take to complete a section?
Sure, that's another great question. Yeah, that's a tricky one. So with PlanX, the nature of it, when you see that logic tree, depending on any sort of selection, it does dictate the further questions that come. So it could be, a section could be between say 3 and 40 questions. So it's a very difficult one. Hopefully what we're doing with the section summary will go further to kind of convey the scope of each section, but in terms of an actual number, that's not possible. I believe Lucy had a hand up.
Yeah, sorry. Hi, I'm one of the user researchers on the project. Just going on to that point that you've raised there, Imran, it's also really hard for us with any application or any sort of service where people are having to go away and collect information. You know, we might have people that are dyslexic, we might have people that are doing this on their mobile phone. So it's actually really bad practice for us to say to people, for example, this should take 2 minutes, when actually it takes them 25 minutes because they don't have everything they need to hand. So we're just trying to use these sections to help prepare people. But yeah, sort of giving them timeframes it's just really not going to lead to a good experience for them, and on the point that Ian said as well.
Sure, that's a fair point.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to move on, and I'm going to hand over to August, who's going to talk about find out if service and the next steps.
Yes, thank you, Christine. And this actually segues beautifully into kind of a preface to this section that we're talking about. So this challenge of giving the user information, but also not giving them wrong information that might not apply to them. So what I'm going to talk about is our update to the end section of the find out if service. So after a user went through the service and they have the result, how do we then guide them towards further steps? And can I have the next slide? What is beautiful about this is how small changes, or seemingly small changes, to how PlanX work can actually have a quite big ripple effect on the user experience. So there are 3 updates here to components in PlanX. One is that the upload and label component, so that's the component we use in the application services and the submission services to allow the user to upload their site plans and elevation drawings and so on, has now a toggle for hiding the upload function and just showing the same list of files as information only. And the same applies to the pay component, which can now display the calculated fee without giving the user a pay feature. So we can add them to the find out if the guidance services at the end of the service to prepare the user for the application services. And this is informed partially by user research, which shows us that users have a great need for this kind of handholding or this kind of steering towards what is expected of them, but it's also informed by the interest of us of guiding the user towards the submission services after they completed the guidance services. Can I have the next slide? And the third new component is a new next step component. So this updates previously, we have just used the question component to present the user different questions and then have them select those and then proceed through the service. The new next step component can immediately hyperlink the user. So if they click on get planning advice, they're taken immediately to whichever site the council wants to put there, but they can also still continue through the service. So if we combine these 3 things together, I will show you now, I will share my screen to show you how different of a user experience that results in. Can you all see that? Okay, and I'll just quickly show how simple this is to toggle or implement in PlanX as an editor. So you just have this little toggle function here that allows you to hide the submission function. So in this case, the upload documents, and the pay function, the pay buttons. And that's all you need to do to transform something that is used in the submission services to the guidance services. So currently, if a user ends find out if journey and they're given their result, what they will see on continue is these 3 really questions that allow them to select how they want to proceed and say they want to proceed to apply to a planning permission application. Then they just get a link and they have to click on it, and that's the end. So very little information that is presented to the user. They're just thrown out to a different service. By using the new components, this is now rather different. So if the user continues from their result, they see this new result section. If they again want to continue to apply for planning application, we can now tell them, we'll tell you what you need to submit with the application. So they click on it. We give them, based on the answers that they provided in the guidance service, the list of documents that they will require. All of these documents have help sections that outline what the document would need to look like. So again, as Ian was saying, they can prepare for what is expected of them if they should proceed to a submission service. And then if they want to submit further information to get information about fees, they can do that. So they can say no here and they skip the fee component. But if they say yes, we can ask them questions relevant to fee exemptions. And say none of these will apply in this case. So this is the first submission from a householder. And then we will tell them the fee for your application will be £206. And we can always preface this with, for example, in this case, that a community infrastructure levy may also be payable. And then we take them to the planning permission service. So the user is now much more well prepared for what is expected of them and have a better understanding of what they will have to go through if they go to the planning permission service. I should say that this, I can stop sharing here, is very much aligned with some of the stuff we've already talked about. So the new section descriptions, which kind of fuel in the same, give the user an expectation of what's expected. And we're also working on new landing pages or templates for landing pages for the council websites that have similar information or information that adds to this to prepare the user for the journey. And if we can go back to the slides, there's just 2 last pages that I want to show that might be relevant for anyone who does the editing work on PlanX. Are the slides being shared? I can't see them now.
I'll reshare them, August. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Yes, so currently, if you want to edit the next step sections as an editor in PlanX, this is what you're looking at, which is not particularly user-friendly. And if we go to the next slide, this is what it looks like now. So it's not just for the user's benefit, it's also for the benefit of anyone who has to actually deal with this. I hope that was helpful. Are there any questions about this?
Yep, we do have a question for you, August. So Dana has asked, well, she said, this is great. So thank you. The question's around what's next for the homeowners and how much will it cost features commonly in phone calls to the planning department.
Yeah, that's brilliant to hear that we're basically addressing stuff that, you know, gives you extra work if a user is confused about what's expected. So that's excellent. Thank you.
There's no more questions in the chat. Oh, there is one more. Presume this is from Ian. Presumably the list of docs are based off national standards and not the council's local requirements.
They are currently, but it's completely possible to have them adjusted towards what the councils require. So these result sections sit in the council's flows. So if the council has particular requirements for documents, then we can just flag that as such and then add them. Alison.
Yeah, just to add to that answer as well. Obviously, one of the nice things about PlanX is we can reuse the same flows. So just like there, you saw that at the end of find out if you need planning permission, you can say, hey, your fee will be whatever it will be. What we're doing is reusing exactly the same flow calculator that we've already built that will be used as part of, say, the apply for planning permission thing. And the same will apply for validation checklists. So through the work that we're doing, building those flows for the apply for planning permission service, for example, where we're baking in those validation requirements. And as you said, August, you know, we've done the national requirements one, and then there's this, you know, this ability to then add local requirements onto that. Exactly the same flows that are used in the apply for planning permission thing to base it on the local validation checklist can then be reused in this service as well. So it'll be exactly the same information, only needs to be maintained once, and it will be reflected in both services.
Thanks, Alistair. So we didn't allow for questions at the beginning when Matt was speaking. So if anybody has any questions for Matt, now's the time to ask them. Or if you have any final questions. I think that's a no. Oh, Matt's got his hand up.
Yeah, not to ask myself a question, I might add, but thank you. I wanted to just take the opportunity while we've got a few people on the call, maybe people that are not working directly as part of Open Digital Planning, to let you know that DLUC's is going to be launching a new funding round for digital planning and PropTech projects next week. So on Tuesday at 10 o'clock is the launch. On a launch event, really, it's an information announcement kind of sharing event. So I'm just going to put the link in the chat for anyone who's interested. There's going to be two different funds. One is the PropTech Innovation Fund, and one is, which links to this work, Digital Planning Improvement Fund. So if you're interested in starting your journey towards modernising your planning services, that's the Digital Planning Improvement Fund, and that's what we work on, and come along on Tuesday morning to find out a bit more. Thanks, Christine.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so we're finishing a bit early. Thank you to everybody who presented today, and thank you for everybody who came and for the brilliant questions. and we will share this video on our social media channels.